Welcome back to another Nature's Always Right video. Today I'm sitting here with Kieran Foran of Trifecta Ecosystems, which is a large aquaponics farm in Connecticut. So I'm really excited to sit down and talk with you. I built my own little Murray Hallam style 3 IBC tote like 6 years ago or something. When I found out about aquaponics, I was so fascinated about it because it uses natural systems to mimic nature, and you're growing organic fish and really high quality plants all at the same time. So I'd love to know, how did you get interested in it and get started in this?
Yeah, definitely. So actually got started in it by reading a book in college called 1491, which is about the arrival of Columbus to the America, or what the Americas looked like before the arrival of Columbus. And so the book was very fascinating and eye-opening. I always had an interest in sort of Mayan and Aztec cultures, but like how advanced those civilizations were was kind of really brought to my attention in that book. And one of the things that stood out to me, there was a large focus on agriculture in the book and how, they had these populations in cities that rival some of our biggest urban centers in the world today.
Oh, really? Wow.
And they were actually feeding, that big population from within an urban environment, all within the cities. They weren't going out to, beyond the mountains and stuff to farm land. They were doing it all within cities. And just to kind of put the population in perspective, one of the lines that has stuck with me from that book is, the decline in the Native American population would be the equivalent today of if New York City's population was reduced to the size of Yankee Stadium. Wow. So that kind of goes to show why these sort of, the knowledge that they had just disappeared, because it was literally like their entire, clan or whatever was wiped out within a single generation. But what was fascinating to us was how they were growing in an urban environment. So they grew, one of the larger Aztec, I think, groups was growing on Lake Teoco or something like that, and doing this form of what they called chinampas. So chinampas are where they put essentially huge, large lanes of compost in a lake, and sort of root that in with fruiting trees and stuff, and then under the trees they grow vegetative crops. And then and then obviously there's fish in the lake that are sort of once are contributing to those compost piles, and they're also farming the fish. And so it really just opened our eyes, like, wow, they got a huge sought after healthy protein source. They're growing an abundance of food, and they're doing it all in an urban environment. Why can't we do that today? So one long late night internet journey later, we found out that the modern day version of chinampas is aquaponics.
Yes.
So it's basically taking that same concept and just putting it in a container. And it really made sense to us because coming from Connecticut, the best farmland in the state is along the Connecticut River, and the reason that it's the best farmland in the state is because every spring when the snows melt, the river floods the fields that are along there, and so the fields act like a sponge and take up all the nutrients from the river. And then over the course of the year, the crops take up those nutrients, and then the cycle goes and goes again each year.
Wow.
So the way we always sold it in Connecticut is we're just taking that rivershed ecosystem and putting it in a container. So that was kind of the impetus for us getting started. And when we got started, we had a small system while we were in college, and then after graduating, we moved to my co-founder's Spencer's parents' backyard, and just built a Murray Hallam style system. Ours was 6 IBCs, 1 fish tank, and we just were trying to feed ourselves, but we had way more food than we knew what to do with. So instinctually, just handed it out to friends and family. They come back and they're like, wow, this food's amazing. And it's way better than we can get at the grocery store. It's so fresh. Can we start buying this from you?
Yeah.
And then it's like, wheels are turning now, This no longer needs to be an expensive hobby. So we started our first CSA that winter, just a greens and herbs CSA. It wasn't a fully fledged thing or anything. I think it cost people $7 a week. But we grew through the winter. We learned the growing pains of trying to be in New England with keeping fish alive, which was definitely a challenge. Sorry to our first cohort. But and then we went to the farmers market that spring, made a little bit more money there. Probably had about $2,500 that we took in. And then we approached a local farmer, just trying to expand, and he was fascinated by our system. He's an old school farmer guy, and he was just like, he thought what we were doing was magic, and he was like, well, yeah, sure, I got plenty of land that I'm not using if you guys want to do that. He had greenhouses that from his foray into a greenhouse business from the 70s, and he's like, they're in pieces and in shambles, but there's probably enough parts there for you guys to make a greenhouse, and lo and behold, there was. So we got started with about 1,000 square foot greenhouse, and from there it was like, you know, we keep going to the markets, did a CSA, but, you know, what we were doing started spreading just word of mouth. Like, have you been to Rob's? Have you seen the cool farm that's going on up there? You know, they're growing food and water. Like, and so people started coming to the farm. We got a lot of, like, teachers coming in, and they're starting to ask questions like, can I put this in my classroom? Can I bring field trips out here? And so beyond growing the food, we sort of learned that aquaponics was an opportunity to to educate, to empower, to you know, improve lives, to inspire students in a classroom environment in a way they never had been before. So we've sort of grown from beyond being just a commercial farm to now, you know, we're in a couple dozen schools in Connecticut, a couple nonprofits.
They have their own systems?
Yeah, most of them have their own systems, not all of them. Some of them just use our curriculum, and we wrote our curriculum in a way where you don't actually need a system to be able to
study about how it works. And,
but most of them have their own system. They range in size from, you know, something that's a 30-gallon fish tank with 2 or 3 zip grow towers above it to stuff that's a couple of media beds stacked above, you know, a DWC bed with, you know, the full filtration setup off the fish tank. So, you know, it depends on sort of, obviously, the school budget, but it also depends on sort of the level of education that the kids are at. The younger ones kind of get the smaller systems to, you know, it's more of a showcase thing, and they work on it, you know, learning responsibilities and stuff. And then the older ones, they get the big systems, and sometimes they're helping design them, but they're doing the intricate biology work and stuff on them.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so you mentioned that you're in a lot of different schools, and I just from, you know, this week I've learned a lot more about your business and stuff. You're working with a lot of different people and trying to educate and giving lots of different people skills. Can you tell me more about, like, the different groups that you're working with and how that's been working out for you?
Yeah, so it did all start back when, you know, we're getting those visitors to Rob's Farm, and people, you know, outside of schools too, a lot of nonprofits were just like, this is really cool, this is something we'd love to do at our organization. Do you think there's a way we could fit a program around what you guys are doing? And one of the initial organizations that we worked with was the ARC of Meriden Wallingford, and they work with adults with intellectual and developmentally disabled disabilities, you know, who varying degrees of functionality, but, you know, we designed a program with them where they have 3 aquaponics systems, and they have about 10 to 12 you know, adults who work on the systems on a given week, and it's part of a workforce development program. What they're trying to do is actually give these guys, you know, a framework where they can learn personal soft skill development, but then also the skills you need to join a workforce. You know, the importance of task completion, the importance of checklists and responsibility, you know, and taking an active role in the work that you're going to do, learning how to ask questions and all those sorts of things. So it's been a obviously rewarding program, but just fascinating to see the way that aquaponics can empower just about anyone.
That's really cool.
And so we started working with more and more groups like that, and it sort of convalesced into this concept that, you know, we've always, you know, going back to what inspired us to get started in the first place, was this idea that cities could be their own food producers, and that it didn't have to rely on, you know, suburban and rural producers to feed these large populations. And what we sort of identified was there's these pockets in every city of hidden farmers. There's these groups of people, whether it's schools, whether it's nonprofits, whether it's veteran organization, old folks homes, rehab facilities, you know, prison rehabilitation or reentry programs, that we sort of called hidden farmers in waiting.
Yeah.
You know, they're there, they have the space, they have the time, they have the people who can do farming. They just need the plan of action and the way for it to make it easy. And aquaponics, because you can do it anywhere you have power and water. Like, you know, you don't need soil, you don't need a plot of land. You know, you can do it in a closet if you want. You can do it, you know, in a waiting room or something. And so we just kind of got this idea, like, okay, if we can have this network of small farms that are all kind of, you know, working independently, but then connected through this common point of, you know, a sales channel for their food, it has the impact of a large-scale farm.
Yeah, and that's something really interesting that Kieran and his business partners are doing. They've created a network, a little distribution network as well. Could you tell us more about that? Because that's something I'm really interested in, especially with like Jeff with Profound Foods. He's got a food hub now, and I think this is something that's going to be really important to the future of small scale farming, is having these just really tight-knit distribution channels for us small farmers, and it just makes us a much more powerful, and we can have a much more bigger impact as small farmers.
Yeah, for us it was kind of born out of necessity. You know, it was one thing when we were building small systems for classrooms and, you know, they're just eating the produce internally in the classrooms and stuff like that. But when we were starting to build these larger systems for nonprofits, for ourselves, and, you know, in a couple instances for just other hobbyists or entrepreneurs, the thing that we needed to solve for them was they're not salespeople. They don't, or they're not used to selling products. They're not used to marketing and advertising, you know, around food or anything like that. So we needed to make it, you know, path of least resistance for them. So we just decided the model would be is we'll buy the food back from you and we'll distribute it. And because we have our commercial farm and we have a commercial kitchen on our farm, we're able to, you know, to take the raw produce and create it into value-added products or put it into CSAs. And, you know, so they get a good value for it. And because we're able to value add it up, we get a good value for it too. And so it's a win-win on both sides. And now it takes care of the problem of all these little farms having to put all this time and effort into what should be a shared resource, which is, you know, we have the skills of sales and marketing. It's not a problem for us to find a place for the food to go. There's people who are desperate for it because it's so much different than what, as you know, with your food, so much different than what they can buy in the grocery store. So like,
and they can taste and see the difference, you know.
And I'm sure you get it the first time someone tastes your stuff, it's like they never go back after that. You know, it's
so
like customer for life. You know,
like I was on vacation. I had to go to the grocery store, and I was just so disappointed with the quality. And then and then you get that customer for life, and they want to support you. So it's fantastic. Could you tell us kind of a little bit, just like for people who don't know, like, what is aquaponics? Like, how does it actually work? You know, it's fish and water and plants all in one system, and how does that kind of work?
Yeah, so it's basically, you know, the reason we call ourselves Trifecta Ecosystems, this is how we approach it when we're teaching people in school, is we teach it through the Aquaponics Trifecta. So there's we break it into a hardware and software kind of things. There's the living components, and then there's the physical things that you need to sort of integrate it all together. So on the software, the living side of things, you need fish, plants, and then you need microbes, biology. So that's the secret that makes the whole thing work. So the heart of the aquaponics system is the nitrogen cycle. So the fish, you feed them, and then it's actually mostly through the breathing, through their gills, they release ammonia into the water. So the same way we exhale carbon dioxide, they're exhaling ammonia.
And ammonia, NH4.
Yes. I'm horrible with my chemistry, so I'm not the one teaching the kids.
But in nitrogen, the nitrogen component. That's where that comes in.
And so that's very important. So, you know, you have this abundance of ammonia, and then because that's present naturally, there's nothing that we add to the systems to make this happen. The teams of bacteria come into the system. For the lower kids, we just call them Team 1, Team 2. But for those that are interested, the first round is Nitrosomonas, which, you know, eats the ammonia and then produces nitrite as a result. And then Team 2 comes in, Nitrobacter, and it produces nitrate, which is the form of nitrogen that plants use. So what we're doing is just creating the natural nitrogen cycle process. And then because nitrogen for plants is kind of like water for humans, it makes up, you know, a huge percentage of their composition. Stuff grows phenomenally in aquaponics, especially green stuff, so leafy greens and herbs.
Right, fantastic. So what are you guys growing? What's your kind of main products that you're selling right now?
Yeah, so we grow probably a dozen plus varieties of lettuce at any given time over the course of the year, but we always kind of break it into three categories. We have our basic lettuce mix, which is, you know, generally, you know, made up of a red leaf, a green leaf, and then something that's, you know, in between those two. Then we do our super greens mix, which is always got a base of kale and Swiss chard, but then we'll rotate in things like bok choy or amaranth greens or mustard greens or, you know, various other stuff. Then we have a cooking greens bundle, which will generally contain some of the same stuff that's in the super greens mix, but instead just a larger form, you know, for sauteing and stuff like that. And then we grow a bunch of different varieties of herbs, and those rotate, you know, throughout the season, but a couple of varieties of basil, sage, parsley, thyme, you know, the usual.
Nice. The really more popular ones that everybody's using, and very cool. So I think something that you guys are doing really well that I was really impressed with is that like nothing's going to waste. Like you're getting the revenue streams as high as you can from all the different aspects of how you grow. And I think that's so important for especially a farming business. So nothing's going to waste. And one of the things in aquaponics I know is difficult as far as sales goes, as far as getting the highest profit margin, is selling the fish. And to me, the aquaponic grown fish are incredible. It's an organic way to raise fish. You can't use any poisons, you can't use any chemicals because the fish will die. So, you know, as we know, the oceans are pretty darn polluted at this point. Our rivers aren't the best either. So I see aquaponics as a really great way to provide people with organically raised fish. And I thought that the way you guys are selling it right now is really smart, getting as much money as you possibly can. Can I tell us how you're doing that?
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, just to touch on sort of why it's different from standard aquaculture. In aquaponics, like the fish and the plants, they're sort of the litmus test for each other on how honest you're being. So if we were to spray anything on our plants, including organic pesticides or anything like that, that would affect the health of our fish. And conversely, if we were to feed our fish antibiotics or chemical treatments to treat disease or something, that would kill off our plants. So you know that we're being honest if you see living fish and you see living plants in our system. So it's like, that's why it's such a cool, clean source of protein. And the reason why we chose aquaponics in particular is because, you know, going back to the history of it, it's a desirable source of protein that you can grow in an urban environment. You know, most, you know, urban solutions are, you know, either growing bugs or growing rabbits and stuff. And it's like, most people aren't going to eat that stuff. It's not desirable. But vast majority of people eat fish. So that's why it's so awesome. And then in terms of, you know, the price point, unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, but just the position we're in right now is we're a small scale farm. So, you know, we have 4 aquaculture tanks. We harvest about 100 to 150 pounds of fish a quarter. So that's not, in the grand scheme of things, it's really not a lot. And then, you know, we're feeding the fish all the time. That feed costs money. There's labor that goes into, you know, the water testing and, you know, checking on them to make sure they're free of disease and all that stuff. So, you know, basically when we put all our inputs in, we found out, you know, we needed like $8+ a pound in order just to break even on the fish, which is not something you're going to be able to sell to a supermarket. It's not something that most people are going to want to buy. And so the way we kind of got around that is, okay, let's create value around the fish. Let's create an event that, you know, will give more than just I'm getting a fish and now I need to go cook it. So we decided to do farm to table dinners as the way we get rid of our fish. So once a quarter, we'll pair up with a restaurant who's willing to create some unique dishes around what we do. We raise channel catfish, yeah, you know, we'll just, you know, we'll set the ticket price, and the ticket price can account for a $10 per pound piece of fish. It can account for the fact that we need $4 to $5 a pound for our greens and our herbs and stuff like that. So it's a great way to get the value that you need, but then also you're providing an experience that's unlike any other. You know, our last one we did in the middle of December in Connecticut, and you know, farm fresh ingredients, you know, stuff that we had bought at the end of October and cold stored so that we would have other stuff besides the stuff we grow, like squashes and stuff like that. But it was like, it was an experience that people had never experienced before, eating farm fresh food in Connecticut. It's snowing outside, and here we are eating stuff that was harvested yesterday. You know?
That's incredible. Yeah, I love that story. And I've heard, you know, I haven't had the opportunity to try the fish grown in one of these systems yet, but I hear the flavor is better too.
Yeah, I mean, you know, because we're not, you know, in standard aquaculture, you know, there's generally you have to purge the fish, which means you stop feeding them for a week or two before you harvest them, because you know, there's a backup of waste in their system because they're being overfed so that they can grow out quickly. But because we're having to do the balancing act with the plants, we're feeding them what they're supposed to be eating, and you know, it's a very clean source of food as opposed to what the standard industry uses.
They're using like a lot of GMO stuff, aren't they? And like corn and
it depends definitely. It's the fish food actually, when I started looking into it, commercial fish feed isn't as bad as I anticipated it would be. But there are definitely brands that are heavy soy, heavy corn, which is not necessarily what fish want. But for most of the protein, at least in fish, is coming from things like anchovies and sardines and like the little stuff that most people don't eat anyway. So you know, it's definitely still contributing to the overfishing of the oceans, but it's not as bad of a problem as I thought it was going to be.
Interesting.
But yeah, because we're not, following the standard practice, our fish come out tasting much better. We don't have to purge them or anything like that. And like our chefs, every time they get the fish, they're like, I've never seen a fish that looked this white or was this clean or had this flavor to it. So yeah, it's been great. Obviously I'm biased, but we had Nick and Brandon out from Bootstrap at our farm table dinner, and they gave it the stamp of approval. So if you make Nick happy, you're doing something right.
That's true. Yeah, Nick is not a fan of seafood, so that's a good litmus test right there. So as far as inputs go for your farm, you have to feed the fish. What else do you have to do to make this system run?
Yeah, so obviously plants don't live on just nitrogen alone. So there is some supplementation that we have to do. For the most part, we try and find a feed that's got a broad source of micro and macronutrients. So we're not supplementing in the same fashion that a hydroponics farm would. It's more just about making sure our levels don't drop at certain stages of growth. But yeah, we supplement calcium, iron, potassium, and then soluble seaweed extract for sort of all the rest of the micro and macronutrients. Nice. Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's obviously, because we have the fish in the system, they have to be of the highest grade and quality and completely organic and free from any, additives or anything like that, or we, see our fish go belly up. So, we know what we're putting in is at least very safe for the end consumer, but it isn't a fully closed loop sustainable system, at least yet. We're obviously all trying to work towards it.
Yeah, yeah, and this stuff is so new too. There's so much development and innovation going on right now. And something I've been really interested in, I have no idea if it works or not, but I've been studying a lot of Korean natural farming, so collecting indigenous microbes from really advanced ecosystems, also creating your own nutrients. So you mentioned calcium. In Korean natural farming, you can make your own calcium from eggshells or from seashells, very, very, very cheaply, and it's very pure as well. So I'm really curious, I guess, if some of these other techniques can maybe apply to hydroponics and aquaponics. Maybe you can foliar feed some of your plants as well, and maybe that would be possible. We don't really know yet. Maybe we can collect either IMO from forest or IMO from a very advanced lake or pond system, taking that, maybe combining that with even biochar. And biochar is a way that you can kind of inoculate a lot of pore space within the biochar, so it can hold an immense amount of these microbes, and then you could take that to either enhance your system or maybe inoculate the next aquaponic system that you're setting up. I don't know. There's like a lot of different ideas. So I'm kind of curious if any of this makes sense to you. And
yeah, it's interesting too because I don't know if this was the case or not, but I felt like I might have been the only one who knew what Korean natural farming was at this conference beforehand, and it's something that's been on my mind for 5+ years now, but you just don't have the time to do everything that you want to do. Yeah. But I think there's huge potential, especially there is some waste that comes off our system, being able to compost that out and then add in debris and stuff like the eggshells from other people. Can we make a brew that's an aquaponics brew or something, or just organic brews for the hydroponic industry, and then like you said, specialized foliar sprays, so I don't have to add calcium carbonate. I can just spray calcium foliarly and get it that way. So I'm fascinated by what you're doing. I definitely think there's a lot of potential in the industry, and I really like the idea that you can do with the inoculation with Korean natural farming, where like you can get the microbes from a specialized source that are gonna best help your crop selection. So we can find stuff that's very good for leafy greens versus stuff that's good for which is completely different from what you want for tomato growth or something like that. So that I find fascinating, and anything we can do that closes the waste cycle, but also improves the efficiency, like why wouldn't we go down that route? It just makes too much sense. So.
So yeah, I think it's gonna be really interesting to see the development that happens over the next many years, and where this whole thing goes. And so we can we keep pushing towards a more and more natural system, mimicking nature like to the max as we can. So I'm excited to see what you guys do.
We're gonna have to collaborate on that one over the next couple months, because I think there's a lot there, and I'm very excited to see what we could do. It's like the only blight that we can put on aquaponics right now is like there are a couple inputs that aren't as sustainable as we'd like them to be. So if we can solve that solution, then we have something that we can in full confidence say is 100% good for plant and community.
Yeah, absolutely. So up in Connecticut, there's not a lot of light. You're also doing this indoors as well. So how are you pulling this all off, giving the plants enough, they've got the nutrients, we've explained all that, but then how do they also need, they have to photosynthesize and all that. So how does that work?
Yeah, so we use LED lights to light our plants, and that's honestly our biggest cost in terms of our cost of production. Replacing the sun is not cheap. We did choose our building. It's got the largest solar array in the state of Connecticut, so we know a large majority, especially during the right time of year, is coming from that source. It's obviously not 100%. But that's the challenge of doing this in New England, whether you're growing in a greenhouse, which is how we got our start, or whether you're growing indoors like we are now, is that you've got 5 months out of the year where you can grow stuff. The other 7, it's either too cold or there's not enough sunlight. Okay. That challenge as a farmer for our farmers is they got 5 months to make all the money that they need to over the course of the year. Wow. But what we do by moving indoors or when we're in greenhouses is we're providing a steady supply year round, and that's sort of the value we're able to bring to the community. It's how we get a lot of customer loyalty, because we're there for them during the hard months when they can't go to the farmer's market.
And you can't get local produce. Yeah. Well, this is a way of providing local produce like year round, and that's something that I think is really valuable about indoor growing, especially.
Yeah, so, light, obviously heating the water, those are our 2 big electrical inputs, but, there's also the other side of things of, like, water savings and stuff like that, because we're a recirculating system, it's, I think the USDA says on average, if you're just doing, and this is obviously inefficient, but if you're just doing sprinkler systems, it takes 50 gallons of water to grow a head of kale. In our system, it takes 0.5 gallons to grow a head of kale. So, that's significant, especially when you're looking around the world. Like, water is going to be the next resource that people are going to start fighting over. Like, we need to be smarter about how we use that. And food production is one of the biggest users of water. Yes. So, we're preaching to the choir here, but like, that's why we also were so excited about this technology and this way of farming, is that, we're only losing water to what the plants take up and a little tiny bit to evaporation. Otherwise, it all stays within the system.
That's fantastic. It's been really great talking to you, Kieran. I learned a lot about aquaponics. It was fun to get to ask you some of the questions I've always wanted to ask experts about it. And someday I want to go out to his farm and see how it's done in person. And I know that you guys are working on, I guess before we go here, what's the future for Trifecta Ecosystems? What's your next big thing looking forward into the future? Yeah, so we're really looking to kind of prove out the model that I was talking about about this distributed network of farms. So we just acquired a 3.5 acre farm in the heart of New Britain, which is a totally unique thing of its kind. It's dead set in the city. Across the street are bodegas and liquor stores. Like, it's in that type of neighborhood, but it's got 22,000 square feet of greenhouse, 3 acres of soil, and so we're gonna greenhouse out the we're gonna aquaponics, put aquaponics systems in the greenhouses, and then we're gonna probably do something similar to what you're doing out in the fields. Cool. Awesome. Not necessarily no-till to start, but working towards that, that thing. So, and then using that farm, we're going to 10x our capacity. So we're really going to put our test of what's the market demand for local food, and the scalability of this model and everything.
Yeah, and then we have our centralized processing center in Meriden, where we can take all that stuff, create value-added products or redistribute it as CSAs and stuff like that. So that's what we're looking to do, and then just continue our work with schools and nonprofits, being their farm to X provider for that, and just helping them with that programming.
That's really cool, Kieran. Yeah, man, it's really exciting stuff, guys. So, definitely check Kieran's work out. Where can they find you on the internet? Yeah, so trifectaecosystems.com, facebook.com/Trifecta Ecosystems, @Trifecta Ecosystems on Instagram, and @Trifecta Eco on Twitter. And from there you can find our stuff on Weekly Harvest and City That Feeds Itself as well. Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Kieran.
Appreciate it too. Thanks for having the chat. It's always fun to get to talk about these things that you don't get to talk about with anyone else.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah, it's a blast.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we'll do it again.